afternoon, evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. That's Flint's best podcast studio. And we are going to be soon challenging the national alphabet soup. That's CNN, ABC, NBC, you name it. We are going to be not resting on our laurels and continue to work hard to become the #1 network in all of America and throughout the world. And if that's not really true, it's our story, we're going to stick with it. You know, last week we interviewed Mr. Scott Bowman, who is a candidate for the senatorial position now held by Senator Debbie Stabenow. And Mr. Bowman came in through the telephonic airwaves and was gracious enough to honor us with his presence. And I want to thank him again for that honor and for coming into the studio through the network and sharing some of his ideas with us. Hope to do that again. We've gotten a lot of responses from that interview and want to keep people apprised of that election as it unfolds. Also, last week, we didn't have a person that I feel when he's not here, it's like the studio is unclothed. And he's back in the studio this afternoon. And that's Mr. John Wilson. And if anybody does not have any idea of the importance of Mr. John Wilson to the studio, those of us who do programs here, we're kind of aware of it. And those that come in and pitch it when John can't be here, which is very rare, they do a good job. But there's nothing like having the man that's in charge most of the time to be here. And I'm very comfortable when I see him in the studio, because I know if he has anything to say, he'll just join right in the conversation and help to make the flow go as it should. And this studio, which we are trying to work hard for your confidence and trying to present information that is in fact accurate and not only informational, but entertaining as well. And I think this program this afternoon will fit that bill quite well, because we're going to be talking about two main issues, and whatever else comes up, maybe some of the phone calls will come in and we'll change the discourse. But what we plan to do is to talk about two main issues, and that is the Troy Davis case and the Herman Cain victory in Florida this past weekend in the straw poll down there, where McCain had, I think, 37% of the vote, and he trumped the three closest competitors' votes combined in the straw poll, non-binding straw poll that was held in Florida. And we need to talk about that because of some of the spin that's taking place trying to explain this victory away. And I'll explain before we go off the air this afternoon why they are trying to explain Cain's victory away, because there's some politics going on here, and we need to understand that, as we do need to explain and understand all the hoopla that occurred last week over this trial. And really the trial had been held in 1989 in Troy Davis's case, and the jury's verdict of execution for the heinous act of killing a security person by the name of McPhail. I think his son was 2 years old at the time. And all the hoopla that came up because of the verdict was finally, through all of the appeals over 20 years, was finally getting ready to be instituted. And it was just quite interesting. All of the noise was being made out there of trying to act like this cold-blooded killer was, in fact, innocent. I have to tell you something. I'm always amazed when people jump on a bandwagon because it's in the news. And I see that this camera right here is the one that's on right now. We have some of the cameras here. I do see the light there, John. We have some of the cameras in the studio. So if you see me looking around while we're doing our taping, it's because we have so many cameras in the studio. We're so sophisticated right now that I have to look and see where the camera is, because we have so many cameras that go, one go, the flight light goes on and off. We just like Fox Network and CNN, MSNBC, well, not so much like MSNBC. We're not a socialist network here. But, you know, how they turn toward the camera, because this camera light goes on, they turn toward the camera, and that light goes on. So we're kind of doing that in the studio these days, because there's so many cameras picking up our image. in the studio, so we have to kind of pay attention to where the lights are and then turn toward the camera. Because at one time, I remember when I first started down here, we didn't have to worry about that because we had one camera in the room. And I can remember interviewing people, John, and at the end of the interview, I would say, well, I want to thank you for coming in, and I want you to look into the camera and tell the people as a candidate what you do if you install an office. And they would say, you mean to tell me that this is not just like a radio production, there's a camera, it would be that little camera over the wall, in the corner on the wall, and they couldn't even pick it up. So they walk in here now, it's like, whoa, what happened? But we are becoming a #1 podcast studio, and we're very proud of the achievements we've had over the course of time that we've been on the air. And I don't think we're going anywhere because we are getting more and more feedback from the public, and as long as we're getting positive feedback about what we do here, we can pretty much believe that we're going to do our best to stay around and continue this discourse, because we need to have a conversation in our community. And a lot of what is being said out there by the talking heads is a lot of hot air campaigns, a lot of noise being made without any documentation. The Troy Davis case is one example of that. I have to be honest and just say this. When I first heard about the pending execution of Troy Davis, I really had never heard of the case before. But as soon as I was alerted through some of my Facebook friends, and some of the people that called on the phone and said, have you heard about the pending execution of Troy Davis? Have you heard about that? When I heard the case, I immediately set out to find out more about what was going on. And so I went back into the archival records and read everything and get my hands on about this case, going back to 1989 when this incident occurred, and read a lot of things about it just by going to the primary sources, and then going to the newspaper and looking at the news reports, which is what had everybody so antagonized and had everybody so excited and so hostile about the injustice of the case and so on. Having read the actual data about the case, and then reading the news accounts and realizing that there was a gap between what one source was saying and what the other source was saying, and realizing that the foundational information that was there in this case, that which the jurors looked at, did not fit the narrative of what I was reading in the paper. But those who just relied upon the news elements to give them the reports of what happened in this trial certainly did not have any privy to that information, and so therefore they drew the conclusions they were being led to draw by the slanted and biased media report. I mean, where have we seen that before? And this is just another example of the media leading and hoodwinking, leading the public by their nose and hoodwinking them with this slanted and biased reporting that led them to a conclusion that it had no other alternative to make if they were just using that basis of information. That information is the basis for their conclusion, which is what they exactly did. But those of us who went and did the homework, and the homework, quite frankly, in this time period is much easier to do because you have that at your fingertips. I mean, I just looked at it this way. There was no excuse for the people running off as they did, being misinformed as they were, based on the fact that you can get on a computer and just type in the name and just go back and do the research, which very few people apparently did, which is why they were able to manipulate the environment and get people out there to carry out an agenda that they knew not from whence it came. And many of them weren't even aware, probably most of them by large numbers weren't even aware an agenda was in place here. But we'll talk about that also as we get into looking at this case. First of all, the first thing that I found in my research was when the public was being told that of the 9 witnesses. Now this is really quite problematical when you consider what the evidence is. 9 witnesses, what the press was reporting. 9 witnesses that testified in the trial in 1989 and brought about the execution verdict in 91. 9 witnesses to the event. Of that 9 that testified in the trial, according to the news reports, 7 of them had recanted. So if you say 7 out of 9, I did the math, by the way, because I like to kind of make sure that I just look at the numbers and see what is really going on. What are the nuanced points that are being made? I mean, where's the manipulation here? And so they said 9 witnesses actually were there at the scene. Didn't say any of them knew this guy. That was kind of left out, but that's another part of our discussion. We'll get to that hopefully later on as well. But of the 9 witnesses that were at the scene when this officer was in fact murdered, 7 of them, which would then be 78% of the witnesses, would have recanted of their testimony. Now that's quite a large number of people. I mean, 7 persons out of the 9, and so the narrative is that if 7 out of 9 who testified formally, which led the jury to its conclusion, then this verdict certainly cannot stand, because they've not only raised reasonable doubt, they've raised ultimate doubt, because 7 people are now saying that they were in error in terms of pointing out this Troy Davis and fingering him as the person who pulled that trigger and killed that officer who came to the rescue of I think a homeless man that was being beaten with the butt of a gun. And when the officer tried to intervene, the security guard tried to intervene, then he was shot one time as he was laid on the ground. The person then shot him again, and the reports were he had a smile on his face. So now there's according to the press, there's last minute doubt. Well, first of all, 7 out of 9 witnesses. There was something left out here, and my research, by the way, was the same as the research that was done in an article I read later on. It was amazing how much of what I had researched was what I found in an article that was done by Ann Coulter. And she wrote an article. Let me see what the date of this article is, because it was after I posted on Facebook. But I was just amazed at how our research congealed and was congruent and coincided with what I had found in my own research in this matter. And all of the points she made there in this article called Mamia's the Word. Mamia, M-U-M-I-A apostrophe S, the Word. And the reason why she named that is because we have this other person on death row, Mamia, who the pundits are now saying that he was falsely accused, and this officer that was killed in the case where he was, he didn't do that either. Of course, all these persons have been falsely accused. So when I read Ann Coulter's article, I said, let me bring it to the studio and just read this, because those points that she made are consistent with the data. And anyone that wants to go behind my research and go behind Ann Coulter's research and go and see it for themselves and see what is actually reported as far as their actual evidence. I mean, if you're just going to use the press as the basis of a conclusion you draw, then you are going to be running into a lot of problems down the road, because this media is very much slanted toward a certain objective, and I don't think you rely. I don't think we have independent media anymore in this country. It's so slanted, it's so biased. And this is one other example of it. Here is what Ann Coulter wrote. And this article, I think, hits the nail on the head in every paragraph. Mamia's The Word is the title of the article. And if you want to find it on yahoo.com, that's the one I use, but I've been using MSN lately too, so I want to keep them honest and watch what they're doing, because that social network, you have to pay attention to it, just keep up to what the latest that they're pulling in their nonsense. But this one came off about yahoo.com, and it was an article written by Ann Coulter that came out on the 21st of this month, and it is in the Town Hall columns. You know, it's a conservative column. And I know people are going to be upset to find out that Moss is reading a conservative column. I dare you. Get off the plantation and show some independence of thought. She says in the article, for decades, liberals tried persuading Americans to abolish the death penalty using their usual argument, hysterical sobbing. I mean, that's the argument they use. Just crying out loud. Only when the media began lying about innocent people being executed did support for the death penalty began to waver, falling from 80% to about 60% in a little more than a decade. Silver lining, that's still more Americans than believe in man-made global warming. So now we went from 80% to 60% of the public that was in favor of the death penalty, which, by the way, is in 38 of the 50 states. Only 12 states do not have a death penalty, which this is one of the states here. Michigan is one of the states that doesn't have a death penalty. We got rid of the death penalty in Michigan in 1846, 1847, and we're going to execute it, by the way, in this state. I say only executed. Only 13 persons in the state of Michigan's history have gone to the gallows and paid the ultimate price in the history of the state. We don't have it now. See, we haven't had it since 1846.
There's something happened in Canada just prior to us becoming a state.
Right.
And that kind of influenced some wrong people allegedly hung in that situation. And in Michigan, framers, when they started, wanted to avoid that wars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is something that we have. But nowadays, it's less likely for some people to use innocent to go to the death.
Yeah, it is, in fact, I'm going to read that part too in this article, because I would argue that it's virtually impossible in this country, and I'm going to show you why and what has happened to authenticate that verdict. But it's certainly not the popular verdict, but that's certainly what history will show, and I'm going to prove that in terms of two major cases, both of which played in the news, and tell you what happened in those two cases and why it occurred. But sentencing one to gallows who are innocent is practically an impossibility in the United States. It's not impossible elsewhere, where politics plays into the verdict based upon who controls the political machinery of the nation. But that is not the case here in the United States. But we don't want to get to that, because we want to always indict the system in which we live, thinking it'll be better somewhere else, and can't name where that somewhere else actually is. 59%, continuing with Ann Coulter's article, 59% of Americans now believe that an innocent man has been executed in the last 5 years. There is more credible evidence that space aliens have walked among us than that an innocent person has been executed in this country in the past 60 years, much less the last 5 years. But unless members of the public are going to personally review trial transcripts, I wonder how many persons did that. In every death penalty case, they have no way of knowing the truth. The media certainly won't tell them, as it didn't do in this case with Troy Davis. It's nearly impossible. Now listen very carefully to this part right here. It's nearly impossible to receive a death sentence these days unless you do something completely crazy, like shoot a cop in full view of dozens of witnesses in a Burger King parking lot, only a few hours of the shooting at a passing car while exiting a party. That's what she's saying Troy Davis did. Shot, first of all, and what the press didn't say, is that before McPhail was killed, this same person in a car with another person, not the one he was with at the scene where McPhail was killed, but in a car with another person, this Troy Davis shot another person in the face using the same guns, the ballistic evidence, the same in that shooting, for which he was convicted, by the way, and not sent to the gallows because the person didn't die. But the same ballistics evidence that in that case was also comparable to the shells at the scene of the McPhail killing. Hours apart, by the way, the same day. That person didn't report that. I wonder why they left it out. Anyway, she says it's nearly impossible to receive a death penalty these days unless you do something completely crazy, like what Troy Davis did, shoot a cop in full view of dozens of witnesses in a Burger King parking lot, only a few hours of the shooting at a passing car while exiting a party. This was no Sunday school teacher. That's what Troy Davis did in August 1989. Davis is the media's current baby seal of death row. After a 2-week trial with 34 witnesses. Now, The research is, this is what Ann Coulter is saying, and it's also what my research says, is that there were 34 witnesses, not 9. 34 witnesses that testified at this trial. Let's go on and just see what happened with the ones that recanted, because they were acting like there were 9 and some of them recanted, so only 2 stuck to their testimony. Was the way that the press framed it. Here's another fact the press did not cover, nor did it even try to report accurately on what the numbers were. After a 2-week trial with 34 witnesses for the state and 6 witnesses for the defense, the jury of 7 blacks and 5 whites took less than 2 hours to convict Davis of Officer Mark McPhail's murder, as well as various other crimes. 2 days later, the jury sentenced Davis to death. Now, a brisk 22 years after Davis murdered Officer McPhail, his sentence will finally be administered this week, barring any more of these legal shenanigans that have kept taxpayers on the hook for Davis's room and board for the past 2 decades. The average time on death row is 14 years. Now, if you just compare that with the from 91 to, in terms of now the appeals in terms of the verdict, from 91 to 2011, that 20-year period, and 22 years after the actual incident had occurred, the average time on death row is 14 years. Then liberals turn around and triumphantly claim the death penalty doesn't have any noticeable deterrent effect. As the kids say, duh. It has been claimed in the New York Times and Time magazine, for example, and we certainly can believe those 2 media outlets. They certainly have been up to speed and very accurate and non-biased and objective in their reporting. That's why I canceled my Time magazine subscription. I guess I didn't like the fairness they were presenting weekly on a weekly basis in Time magazine, and I don't like fair reporting, which is why I canceled my subscription. But I would rather believe it was because I got tired of reading a magazine that I could not trust to give me the unvarnished, unadulterated news. I mean, I just got tired of the slants in the reporting. The liberals turn around and triumphantly claim the death penalty doesn't have any noticeable deterrent effect. It has been claimed in the New York Times and Time magazine, for example, that there was no quote-unquote physical evidence connecting Davis to the crimes that night. Davis pulled out a gun and shot 2 strangers in public. What quote, physical evidence, unquote, were they expecting? No houses were broken into, no cars stolen, no rapes or fistfights accompanied the shootings. Where exactly would you look for DNA? And to prove what? I suppose it would be nice if the shell casings from both shootings that night matched. And then she says, oh wait, they did. That's physical evidence. And that's how Ann Coulter ends her article. Now, there's something that she didn't put in there. She's writing saying that there were 34 witnesses, 7 of whom, quote unquote, recanted. Some of them, by the way, and I didn't continue the article on the next page. I should have included the other part of it, where 2 of them were close friends of Troy Davis. And then some of the others only recanted some of the testimony, but did not recant the eyewitness identification. So partial recantation of some of the testimony, couldn't recall some of the things, 20 years later. So, but in terms of figuring who actually did the shooting, that was only 2 persons, both of them who knew who Troy Davis was and were close friends, according to some reports of Troy Davis. And then the other thing is that some of the ones who pinpointed that he was the one who did the shooting knew Troy Davis. And so that didn't come through. 34 witnesses, 7 recantations to some extent, 2 of them being friends of Troy Davis, so you can discount them as being reliable. And really, prosecutors will tell you that recantations, after persons have had a chance to be contacted by attorneys and so on, and doubt being planted in terms of the post events after the trial is over. You know, it's not unusual people to have some doubts about their testimony because you're talking about a man's life, and people want to get it right. They don't want to be the ones that point the finger that led to someone's death because of the fairness and the integrity of most people. They don't want to be involved in that. But that's why courts don't put too much credence in it. But let's say the 7 persons, as the press said, recanted. Okay, there were 34 witnesses. That means that 78% of those witnesses, given those numbers, would have stated that the information they gave was in fact true, and they did not recant their testimony. 78% as opposed to 22%. So you do the math and then draw your own conclusions about what that means. But it certainly does not mean that Troy Davis should have walked away and was innocent of these 2 incidents where the shell casings were the same in one place and another. That's one thing Ann Coulter did not say. But my research was in some other areas that she probably did not look at. And that was this, that the officers, thinking that they had identified who the actual person was, did what many times you find officers doing, who become zealous in building their cases. Sometimes, and you know, I'm not saying this is rare, I'm not trying to make that argument, but many times, we can say many times, they violate the 4th Amendment protocol, which is that you must have a search warrant. I don't know if that's even necessary anymore given the Patriots Act, because now they're telling us they just run into our house and whatever they find once they get in there. If they have, in fact, the dog can walk, they can walk a dog down the street, and if he barks, they can go in there because it looks there's a suspicion being raised and come in your house. But the 4th Amendment is a provision in the Constitution that prohibits illegal search and seizures. And the way you get search and seizure to be legal, you go to the judge and get a court order and have it legally scripted so that you're not out there going like the Lone Ranger, violating people's rights as if the Constitution doesn't exist. And you go in there because you have legal authority to enter the premises and so on and so forth. Well, sometimes the officers, in what they feel is a pursuit of evidence that might not exist if they don't, in fact, go and confiscate the evidence, will exceed the bounds of what is constitutionally allowed. On a human level, I understand it, but on the constitutional level, it cannot be allowed. Because once you say that this particular part of the Constitution can be suspended, and then someone else says that another part of the constitutional guidelines and restraints can be suspended, before you know it, you don't even have a document anymore. That was one of the things I was arguing, by the way, on Facebook with some of the other persons that came up that wanted to argue legalities, wanted to commend this person, again in Florida, by the way, which we'll get to with the Cain incident, who sponsored a law where he passed a law where the children have to pull up their pants. Now, friends were arguing that they were glad the law was passed because they want to have children pants up to their waistline, and they're sick and tired of looking at children out here on the street showing their underwear. Well, I'm sick of it also. But that does not mean that you, in fact, can pass a law telling people how they are to dress if there's no public interest. I'm saying any public interest. I don't mean that you're not interested in it. I'm saying that there's no public disservice being done to it. We had a break here. I'm hoping not talking too much in the camera here, that John, where the power's going off. we were starting moving here, and then the power starts flickering and things like that. But you can't pass laws because someone's upset with a particular thing. Because if you say that they can pass a law because you are upset about children wearing their pants around their thighs, pants on the ground, then somebody might be upset about something that the person who complained about the pants on the ground, some behavior they're involved in, and you pass a law to restrain that behavior. And you go down that road, that's going to be slope. Before you know it, you're passing laws against all behavior that somebody objects to, where no behavior is allowed. And you don't want to go down that road. I mean, if you have a vested interest in the clothing being worn, for example, if everybody was around here wearing their pants on the ground, was going to hold them a bank, and we were able to connect that wearing your pants on the ground leads to and causes, as a matter of fact, people to go in there and hold banks up. Then society has a vested interest then to cut the wearing of pants on the ground, because we can tell through the evidence that at least this kind of behavior is untoward towards civility and society, therefore we have to cut it out. But if you can't show that there's a compelling societal interest in it, to the point where society is harmed by it, then that expression is protected by the Constitution. Now, there are certain restrictions you can place on it, given the fact that there's a vested interest. For example, reading the court cases. You can, in this case, say that if a school, for example, and I sort of did it when I was principal of the school where I was for the last 3 years, you didn't wear it, we call it sagging. And I didn't allow sagging. But the reason why I didn't allow it was because in the school, I think that the way that you dress there, we have a community interest involved in the attire of the students. In other words, the school should be training the youth to be good citizens, successful citizens, citizens that can in fact go forward and establish a career. Otherwise, what are we on schools for? Therefore, since I have never seen, unless you have seen some things I have not seen, I have never seen anyone with their pants on the ground in any kind of position of authority. If you sitting behind a desk, might have got the pants on the ground, I haven't seen it. And so my point was, in terms of compelling them, that's right, compelling them to wear your clothes around your waist, was that we are training, our mission is to turn out citizens that are productive and can be productive in the community. And I don't see anyone in authority getting these jobs, these CEO jobs, with their pants on the ground. So therefore, we have a community interest in the way students dress. I don't think the state can make that argument in terms of just generally saying everyone will dress a certain way. And that was my problem with that injection in that particular case. And so we didn't allow it for that reason. But sometimes you go down the slippery slope and say we're going to outlaw this law, we're going to outlaw this behavior because we don't like it, and before you know it, you open up Pandora's box. Well, the point I'm making about that is that if you allow, in this case with Troy Davis, where the officers went into the house, and what they went into the house for was because the shorts that Troy Davis was wearing that day had blood on them, and that those shorts went in the wash machine, and they're going to wash that evidence away. And what the officers did, they went in that house and retrieved those shorts as evidence in the case. And the court rightfully, of course, we have to say that the court made the right decision in not letting that come in as evidence, because it had been seized inappropriately in violation of the law, the good hands doctrine. And we're not talking about Allstate here. The good hands doctrine is that in order for you to bring forth evidence, you must have, the ones bringing the evidence must have clean hands. In other words, you cannot violate due process procedurally nor substantively. If you do, then the evidence that you in fact acquired through illegal means cannot be as evidence against the accused. We have a constitution here. And so that bloody shirt, so to speak, this shorts in this case here, was not allowed in the court as evidence. I understand that. But the press did not report that evidence even existed, because there was something else going on here that the press did not want anyone to pay attention to. The liberal media, the slanted media, which really belongs more in Russia than it does here in the United States. But the media was trying to lead people by the nose to a preordained conclusion. That is, that we got to get this death penalty out of the other 38 states because we don't want to have a death penalty in the United States. We want to have this capital punishment out because we don't want the state taking upon his hand to have blood on his hands in our name. As if any society can operate that way, because there's such a thing called self-defense, where in defending yourself, sometimes somebody has got to be, placed out of here. That's what we call it, war, and sometimes that's necessary to maintain the integrity of a nation. You might recall, by the way, and John, I think you recall this, is when one of the questions they asked in one of the debates, Rick Perry, because down there in Texas, they have, I think they've executed about 280 some odd people. I know 13 have been executed in the history of Michigan, which, as I said, doesn't have the death penalty. It hasn't had it since 1846, 1847. But in Texas, it's like, Texas and Georgia, they're vying for which one is going to lead the parade in terms of letting it be known that we are one of the 12 states is going to let you know that if you do these crimes that are untoward, these villainous offenses, you kill someone whose job it is to protect society, that role there is so critical that if you don't defend that person's right, and they are the protectors of the community, you are, in my estimation, attacking the whole community because of the position this person holds, which is what McPhail's position was before he was killed and left his 2-year-old child there and so on and so forth. Well, in Texas, they asked Rick Perry in one of the debates, I think this is the one they had at the Reagan Library, and Brian Williams of, the network already, the Socialist Network. When I say Socialist Network, I'm talking about the one that's very obviously socialist, the one that had Larry O'Donnell on there some time ago saying he's going to stop hiding behind the words liberal and progressive. And he said, I'm just going to come out and tell you what I am. I'm a socialist. And I don't know if you did what I did after I heard him say that. Then what I did was go back into the archives and listen to a whole lot of tapes and to look at who else sounded like he sounded in the media that never came out of the closet and said that they were a socialist. And I called out and saw one after the other tape of Phil Donahue, and that's what the conclusion. That's the conclusion I made about Phil Donahue. I don't see an ounce of difference between Larry O'Donnell and the way he sounded and the way Phil Donahue sounded.
So, it's really weird. 70% of the press corps about 15 years ago admitted they did this poll. They came out with 70% of the press corps at the time and identified themselves as very liberals. And the liberals are good too, right? And nothing is too, but it's the a lot of people just list of socialism. They don't even know where the source is. I
don't know how you describe a liberal other than define the liberal as a socialist. What does that mean? And to me, if you say liberal about what? Right, and that's a socialist, agenda. You can call it's just like Larry O'Donnell who said, "I'm gonna stop hiding behind words like liberal and progressive." I'm glad that he was honest enough to come out and say that he's been hiding behind those labels. But if you tell me that there is a difference between liberal, which means more government intervention, more government control, government running the economy, government bringing about entitlements, if you can tell me that's not socialism, then tell me what it is. It's certainly not capitalism. And so I don't see any difference here. And when they were asking, Brian Williams of MSNBC was asking Rick Perry, ask him this incredible question. Do you have a problem sleeping at night? And I have to give Perry credit for this. This is the time when he didn't have to memorize the script, which he has problems sometimes delivering, because it seems to me this man is well rehearsed. And when they ask him a question, you have to think about what is it that he memorized. And he starts a sentence, and he pauses and have to think about what's the next word in the sentence. I mean, he needs that teleprompter that Obama's using. And so he's up there, pausing and stumbling and so on. But he did in this one instance really impressed me when he said that you come into Texas, we have a little thing here that says that we take life the sanctity of life very seriously. And if you come into our state and you do these heinous crimes, then you're going to pay for it with your life. And we want person to understand that. Well, you know, I was not mad at him. But I think what Perry, if he had not had to be rehearsed on everything before he runs it down, could have asked Brian Williams how he was sleep at night. He's a proponent of abortion, at least in terms of putting people to death that have done heinous events. They've done something to that led to that end. But here they are supporting abortion, where there's an unborn child they want to claim is not a human being, is a part of somebody's body, and they're just making a decision. Like hell. Excuse my French. You know, I don't normally use any strong language, but that one right there makes me use strong language. That's as far as I'll go. I don't. You know, we're not going to be doing no X-rated programs here at the studio, but that one right there kind of brings out the venom and the ire, because part of your body is your kidneys and your liver, your lungs, your heart, you know, your footsies, that's your feet. I knew that. I had Mrs. Reed. and other parts of your body. You can't claim that you're born with a fetus in a person born with a fetus in their body. Therefore, that's another body that we have outlawed as having a right to its life. And so Williams asking this ridiculous question: do you feel guilty about putting somebody to death who murdered somebody? And nobody, he wouldn't raise a question about anybody that's out here talking about killing the unborn. That's just my position. You don't have to buy into that position at all. But I can remember, I'll tell you, that's a new thing in our community in particular. That's out there, those who want to join in with the ban in the black community. I can tell you right now that that's a very new position in the black community, and the community, and the total community in general. And that can be seen in see, I don't say anything I can't document, and that can be seen in the film. Since nobody wants to read anything, don't want to read the Troy Davis case. We all got the evidence. We read the newspaper, and I read that one paragraph. But you can go and see that in Raising the Son, in that one scene where Sidney Poitier and his wife are having some problems, and the woman is now pregnant, yet she and her husband are not getting along. And so there's one scene where the mom and the mother comes in the room because she done found out that her son's wife has gone to see this doctor, because you had to go in the alley at that time to do this. You couldn't do it. There was no public place you're going to go and do that. You had to go in the alley and get the guy that's in the alley to do that behind the scenes. And so he comes in the room, and his mother says, "Son, your wife is pregnant." He didn't know that. He said, and she went to that doctor to kill your child. He says, "Mama, you don't know her. She wouldn't do anything like that." And then his wife walks in the room and she says, "Yes, I would, Walter." And he just is jolted. I mean, that was shocking in that scene. And that film, this is in 1960, shows how unusual it was to take that position. This is what Lorraine Hansberry is talking about in that play in 1959, made into a movie in 1960. So don't come telling me, all these persons that are experts when they read a news article, what the facts are. I didn't start this research last week.
By the way, Mr. Ross, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
A few years ago, there was a detailed magazine. It's a fashion magazine. I don't know if it's still in existence, but in 1992, 91, I was up to a friend's. I went to a store with a friend who was working in it, and he was looking at this magazine. And we came across this article about abortions, and they said before abortions were legal or safe, there was say 20,000 women that died of black-botched abortions.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they said then they broke it down on how many would die per week here in the United States now. Well, I find that to be helpful because he's that story, a culture right there. People, he didn't know, 50, that number times 52. If you actually took that for granted, took those facts straight as they were, they said the reason why they make the abortions legal is to make them safer, right? So the woman, right? If you add up the number of how many women die per week because of how abortions now, abortions gone awry.
Mhm.
And they're legal and safe, right? There was actually 10,000 more women each year dying with abortions being legal. Now, maybe one, so something like 25 years, 20-some years after Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I have to, Roe v. Wade in 1973. I have to ask, how safe are those abortions for the children? How many of them, how much safety is there for the child who, when he escapes, you have to have a serious consciousness when the child escapes the abortion process and comes out of a womb alive, how the child then life is seared with scissors in its brain. You have to have a serious conscience to do something like that. And so, yeah, the safety of the person engaging in abortion who's making a decision about the life of someone else. That's just my position. I'm not asking anybody else to buy into it. But you're not going to move me off of this position that I have. I don't care how much argument you do with me on Facebook.
And they say, we didn't know this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you're practicing unsafe sexual procedures, you're having unprotected sex. In this one instance, you're having roughly a year before you're not pregnant, you're having sex unprotected. And then she wanted to have an abortion, and you're still unprotected. And they're really quite clear about, well, we can't do this until she was 18. And I went, thing is, you were bragging about not having very common days for a year. She's not pregnant, she's on the pill. Another kind of vertical. Guess what? That's what the whole process has been involved with. Created floors to protect the perpetuate species. And just, I don't think it's a great few excuses people go to that actually buy.
Yeah.
Well,
I am, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely against it because I don't think we're talking about choice. I tell you what I think we're talking about. I don't think we want to recognize this is a fact. We're not talking about choice. We're talking about the consequences of the choice that we've already made. You made a choice. And what we're talking about here, as they're trying to define, that's where choice starts. The choice does not start there. That's a consequence of the choice. The choice is the choice of you, in fact, not using whatever you need to use to prevent conception in the first place. That's the choice. You didn't do it, and then now you got a consequence of that decision that you made, and you don't want to live with it. So now you're talking about this is choice. That is not choice. That's murder.
Anyway, he's got his own Bible in there. It's concluded. I think it's Heidegger or whatever. Anyway, he said, Peter, he tried to encapsulate his morality and his philosophy, and he's a non-consequentialist, which means you ought to have, well, action happen, but not have, ought to not have the consequences of that action occur. And I'm sitting there, well, then basically, you're sitting here being well-wisher and saying, this is all man, this is all not reality. So basically, that's when he's got his head thrown in his butt. Really, not answers his own consequences. This guy's supposed to be a respected philosophical, figure. He wrote this huge volume on it. His own version of it, he calls himself not consequentialist or whatever. That means no consequences. Every action has consequences.
Yeah, reaction. And I'll tell you something else that I have yet to run into. I have yet to run into a single individual, and by the way, call me if you are the exception to the rule, and also on the Facebook, because I know we hear a lot of Facebook comments. Moss, you fathead. And I'm looking forward to the dialogue because the dialogue doesn't bother me. I don't have censorship on my Facebook, but I have yet to find one person, not 100, not 10. I have yet to find one person who believes in abortion retroactive applied to their own life. I have not found one person like that. Now, if I find anybody like that, if you're one of them, call, is the number across the screen, call the studio right now. We have to write your name down, and you'll be the exception to the rule. But I don't think you get a lot of phone calls on that one, where you want to retroactively go back into your own life and say that that's the kind of thing that you would inject into the mainstream conversation as it affects you. It's always about affecting some other life form to which it doesn't affect your life. As long as you can make that decision, you can then explain it away as if you're not doing what you're doing. I am against it, and I'm not trying to convince anybody of the legal parameters of it based on Moss's moral compass. I'm just telling you where I am, and you need not write me or need not get on my Facebook. Don't curse me out. Not just going to have any bearing upon this. I am not changing.
My task, what I would call, I think it was either C.S. Lewis or David Chesterton termed suicidal thought. What they do is they keep on arguing a position that actually, when they actually argue, they go to a logical conclusion. They undo it, so their own conclusion, their own argument. Basically, they're saying it doesn't matter, abortion doesn't matter, they have the right to do this. If you go down to where that's exactly what you want with it, where you are as a person, and how that's going to be a question now. Their whole argument, their moral stance, just degenerates because they don't have a basis to stand on. They argue basically from handing to no execution.
Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, we really. I wish we had more time on that. I'm gonna get back to Troy Davis, but I wish I had more time on that because I think we can go and look at a history out of which this comes, the landscape out of which it is spun into the present time period and how we got here. Maybe that'll be a future thing we can do. I do have some ideas about it and want to kind of tie that in with some other possible shows in the future. But so stay tuned just in case we get around to doing that in the immediate time period somewhere down the road. But in terms of the Troy Davis, I'm making this point that some evidence was not allowed in court that would have covered this case as if it needed any more solidification around any other evidence. It was interesting that the press would in fact say that all they had was eyewitness reports, and some persons were out here actually saying that eyewitness reports should not be allowed in the evidence. What is this? That if I see something and 20 other people saw the same thing, that's not verification of the event. I mean, that's as ridiculous as this next article I'm going to deal with. We got a few minutes here, and I just want to close out with this piece that's going on in Florida. Because I got to explain, I'm just like Ricardo here, let me explain. The word, of course, is let me explain, but it's so ridiculous. Let me explain. There's an article that came out today, and I could have predicted pretty much as this was going to happen because Cain won, in case you haven't heard the news, Cain won the straw poll that was held in Florida this past weekend, this past Saturday. And although a non-binding poll, it is significant that the next three candidates in line, that's Perry, that's Romney, who came in second. I think Romney had 15% of the vote to Cain's 37%. And they had Perry, I think Perry might have had 11 or 12% of the vote. And who would have been next there? I'm not sure who would have been the third one down from where Cain finished in the polls, but none of them polled well, and I think the next three vote getters, they're told together, would have figured out to be 37%, which is what Cain had. So this is a problem. And so you read nonsense like this right here. And I'm going to interpret this for you when I read it, because you got to understand what's going on here. It says, the verdict from Saturday's Florida straw poll is none of the above. Now, how many of you went to school and had multiple choice questions? You know, A, B, C, and then D would be none of the above, meaning none of the choices above was a choice that you felt you would make. So you just miss A, B, and C. So if you said, if one of the choices above was a choice, and you put down none of the above, your answer was incorrect, wasn't it? That's what I thought. I thought if the A, B, and C, if there was a choice above that you chose that was not, that you said was not any of the above, and you chose one of them, it was none of the above, then the answer was in fact wrong. Well, they flipped that in this case right here. Here's what they did. That, and I'll tell you why they did it as well. What they said was, by choosing Cain, this is almost laughable. I mean, it is laughable. It's not almost laughable. It is laughable. Laughable to the 10th, to the power, to the coefficient of 10. They said Cain, by choosing Cain in Florida, as if they didn't have anything to hang their hat on. Cain is not a contender. He made pizza. Did you like deep dish or a regular? This was a question asked by John King of CNN another network. And so this man was the founder, the CEO, not founder, the CEO that brought Godfather Pizza back. This can't be a candidate for president. He ran a business. And we have to have politicians in here who have got a $16 trillion debt. We have to put more people like that in there. So he says, so he comes out and make this sound bite that resonated. He said that, Mr. Romney, you have this particular part of your economic plan. He said, that dog won't hunt. That resonated with voters. And so I was not surprised to find out that Cain came out #1 in the poll. But now we got a problem here. Because when Cain came out as #1 in the poll, then here's the problem. This black man is running in the Republican Party, and those persons in the GOP voted this man #1 in a poll, taken in the party that's supposed to have all the races in it. You know, the Klan, the Tea Party. I mean, that's the equivalent. Forget the fact that the Klan is in the Democratic Party. That doesn't matter. Don't forget that that's the segregationist party is a Democratic Party. We didn't flip the history, and so now it's the Republican Party got the Klan in it, and the Tea Party is members of the Klan and the GOP. But yet here's an endorsement of this black man. We're going to explain this away. And why we're explaining it away is because it doesn't fit into the narrative. So they have explained it as a quirk in terms of how that happened. They've got to dismiss it. And finally, let me make this point as we close out. Think about the implications of that if that continues down the road. What would happen if you had in the political process what you had in the Super Bowl game a couple of years ago when the Bears played Baltimore? A black coach on the Bears and a black coach on Baltimore, the team that Peyton, the one that can't win the games when it really counts, the big games, because they're throwing interceptions all over the place, but a good quarterback during the regular season. When Dungy coached that game, and the coach over there in Chicago, both of them were black, that was history. Can you imagine what would happen in this country if you had a black person running in the Democratic Party and a black person running in the Republican Party? You see the problem here. There are a lot of vested interest in this racial malaise we have, and if that happened, then a whole lot of vested interest go down the drain. This is a problem that's going on here. So let's pay attention to it, because there's some things going on here that we need to be aware of as that narrative continues to try to explain why Cain, this was none of the above, yet they chose Cain in the election. Makes no sense. Okay, we want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.